Imagine walking through the vast, untamed landscapes of ancient Asia, 70 million years ago. The ground shakes with every heavy step, and the air is filled with the roars of dinosaurs. But wait, is that the distant cousin of the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex lurking in the distance? That's right. While North America had its own T-Rex, ancient Asia had its very own version. This terrifying predator, though unnamed at the time, would eventually be recognized as Tarbosaurus. A colossal, ferocious theropod, Tarbosaurus dominated the landscape much like its North American relative, but with its own set of lethal adaptations that made it uniquely terrifying. If you thought the T-Rex was the only king of the prehistoric world, think again. Tarbosaurus was a force to be reckoned with. Unearthed in the vast expanse of the Gobi Desert by a Soviet excavation team, the discovery of a large skull and vertebrae set off an exciting chain of events. The skull, eerily similar to that of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, led the Soviets to believe they had uncovered their very own Tyrannosaurus. They named it Tyrannosaurus Bator, with Batar meaning hero. At the same time, the excavation uncovered the remains of 3 other theropods, each differing in size. This resulted in the creation of 2 new Gorgosaurus species and, for the largest skeleton, a brand new genus which they named Tarbosaurus, meaning alarming lizard. With its fearsome name, Tarbosaurus was just as intimidating as its discovery. But the true story lies in its similarities to the more famous Tyrannosaurus Rex. Could this predator have been just as terrifying as its North American counterpart? While the Soviet paleontologists were correct in the fact that they had uncovered a new genus, they made some mistakes in their classification. A decade later, further analysis would reveal that every theropod discovered during that expedition actually belonged to just one genus and species. That genus was, of course, the newly named Tarbosaurus. And as a result, the idea that they had found a new Tyrannosaurus or Gorgosaurus was discarded. Nonetheless, Tarbosaurus remained undeniably a tyrannosaur, boasting many features commonly seen in its relatives, including an S-shaped neck, proportionally tiny arms, and fused prial bones. These characteristics linked Tarbosaurus to some of the most fearsome predators in prehistory. But what set it apart was its place in the ecosystem of ancient Asia, far from the familiar North American giants. And of all its relatives, Tarbosaurus most closely resembled its American counterpart, the Tyrannosaurus, sharing similar body proportions and nearly identical endocranial structure. Both dinosaurs boasted similar skulls and teeth. However, there were key differences between them. The Tyrannosaurus had a much wider skull and body, along with proportionally larger hands. On the other hand, Tarbosaurus possessed the smallest hands of any known tyrannosaur relative to its body size. Despite these differences, they were still remarkably similar, and paleontologists currently believe the two to be closely related. Paleontologists believe that the Tyrannosaurus and Tarbosaurus were sister taxa, meaning they were each other's closest relatives within the Tyrannosaur family. This sister group is known as the Tyrannosauridae and includes a third member, the Zuniceratops, which was the smallest and oldest of the 3, residing, like the Tarbosaurus, within Asia. Due to their strong connection, it was once thought by some that the Tarbosaurus gave rise to the Tyrannosaurus Rex, with the hypothesis that some individuals of Tarbosaurus successfully crossed the Bering Strait when it was still connected to North America was once considered a possibility. However, this idea has since been debunked. Recent discoveries have shown that older Tyrannosaurus species, such as Daspletosaurus, existed in North America and likely evolved into Tyrannosaurus Rex. Additionally, a recent study revealed that there was another, even older Tyrannosaurus species, Megaraptor, which predated the Tarbosaurus, further discrediting the idea that Tarbosaurus was the ancestor of the mighty T-Rex. Despite these findings, the study still confirmed that Tarbosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex are sister taxa, meaning they are closely related but not directly descended from one another. In many ways, the Tarbosaurus has been overshadowed by its famous relative, the Tyrannosaurus rex. Its reputation as the T-Rex's lesser-known cousin has made it seem almost insignificant, despite being the second-largest member of the Tyrannosaur family. As the second-largest adult Tarbosaurus were still incredibly large, with the average adult measuring about 10 meters, 33 feet, long, and standing around 3 meters, 9.8 feet, tall at the hips. Thanks to its robust skeletal structure and muscular build, the Tarbosaurus was extraordinarily heavy, weighing in at over 5 tons, putting it in 13th place for the heaviest theropod ever, tied with Suchus and Xenosaurus. To put that into perspective, you would need roughly 5 average-sized giraffes to match the weight of a single Tarbosaurus. Specimens show that this terrifying predator didn't stop there. One giant skull, measuring 1.35 meters, 4.4 feet, long, is thought to have belonged to an adult that reached 12 meters, 39 feet, from snout to tail, making it just as long as the Tyrannosaurus rex. While it was nearly identical to the T-Rex in length, it was still lighter and shorter in height. Despite this slight size difference, the Tarbosaurus had no problem asserting itself in its homeland, where it was still the largest predator around by a significant margin. This secured its position as the dominant apex predator, a role only further cemented by its massive jaws and bone-crushing bite, true to tyrannosaur form. The Tarbosaurus had a massive, robust skull that was covered with an unusually large amount of muscle. This skull had a large fenestra, or opening, that served as an attachment point for these muscles, giving the Tarbosaurus a highly powerful bite. Estimates suggest that its bite force reached up to 10,000 pounds per square inch, making it stronger than the bites of even larger theropods like Giganotosaurus and any living animal today. This jaw power was terrible news for any herbivore in its environment. To make things worse, the Tarbosaurus wasn't just a powerful predator. It was also fast and agile enough to quickly close the distance and strike, turning the Tarbosaurus into a nearly unstoppable killing machine for any prey in its territory. The Tarbosaurus was by no means toothless. Adults had between 58 and 64 massive teeth in their mouths, each more serrated than even the Tyrannosaurus rex's teeth. These razor-sharp teeth, combined with its immense power, turned the Tarbosaurus into a walking hydraulic press capable of crushing and tearing through flesh and bone. With each bite, it removed large chunks of meat, rapidly causing catastrophic blood loss and shock in its prey. Naturally, with such terrifying strength and size, the Tarbosaurus became a butcher of giants, capable of taking down massive herbivores and predators alike. Analysis has found that the Tarbosaurus had a preference for Hydrosaurus, Ankylosaurs, and Titanosaurs, some of which, like Sopus and Neosaurus, were even larger than the Tarbosaurus itself. This conclusion is supported by direct evidence, with bite marks on the fossilized remains of these prey species matching those of the Tarbosaurus. Fossil evidence also shows that other large dinosaurs in the area were not exempt from its diet, including giant theropods. But I'm not talking about other Tarbosaurus. I mean the enormous, cumbersome. This was a massive ornithomimosaur that surprisingly outweighed the Tarbosaurus, reaching anywhere between 6 to 7 tons. Unfortunately for it, size wasn't enough to keep it safe, as one recovered specimen showed parts of its body had been viciously punctured and gouged, essentially disemboweling the creature. The attack was so chaotic that when the specimen was first discovered, paleontologists were puzzled by how its remains were so scattered and damaged. Another potential prey for the Tarbosaurus was the Theocenosaurus. This theropod, although slightly smaller, still weighed about 5 tons at its peak. and had the largest claws ever seen in any animal, extinct or living. While there hasn't been any direct evidence yet that Tarbosaurus preyed on it, it's certainly possible. One thing is clear: Tarbosaurus was truly a giant killer, with some paleontologists even speculating that it might have been capable of taking down other giant predators. One of Tarbosaurus's unique traits was an adaptation specifically designed to take down some of the biggest land animals ever, the titanosaurs. Its skull, besides being robust and covered with muscles, was also extremely rigid. The mandible in particular was sturdier and more inflexible than what's seen in other tyrannosaurs. This rigidity likely played a huge role in subduing large herbivores, as it helped Tarbosaurus maintain a tight grip when biting down. It created a unique interlocking mechanism that only Tarbosaurus had, further preventing its prey from escaping. Escape was, essentially, impossible for its victims. When it came to speed, preliminary studies found that Tarbosaurus was capable of reaching maximum speeds of 25 km/h, 40 km/h, which is about as fast as an African bush elephant. While this may not seem like much, it was more than enough to catch sods and large Hadrosaurus, which were both heavier and slower. The Tarbosaurus was undoubtedly a masterclass hunter, capable of delivering devastating attacks with pinpoint precision, even if the hunt itself was still quite messy. One of the Tarbosaurus's remarkable traits was its ability to scavenge when the opportunity presented itself. Various fossil remains show meticulous yet enormous bite marks around certain bones, suggesting that Tarbosaurus could expertly strip the flesh from any carcass lying around. This was a handy skill to have in any situation, but the talent of the Tarbosaurus didn't stop there. This tyrannosaur had a wide range of finely tuned senses that helped it thrive throughout its life, one of which was its sense of smell. The Tarbosaurus had an incredibly developed olfactory system. The Tarbosaurus had a powerful nose, which we know about thanks to a brain cast. It revealed a large olfactory bulb and nerves, traits typically seen in animals with a keen sense of smell. This ability allowed the Tarbosaurus to easily track down prey and even detect the scent of already deceased dinosaurs. It's also been hypothesized that this exceptional sense of smell contributed to complex mating behaviors. Within its olfactory system, there was a large Jacobson organ, which plays a crucial role in detecting pheromones in tetrapods. Given its sheer size, the Tarbosaurus could likely detect all kinds of pheromones with ease, helping it find a potential mate. This potent smelling ability was so vital to the Tarbosaurus that it likely played a larger role in hunting and socializing than even its vision did. The areas of its brain dedicated to this sense were remarkably developed. The areas of the brain associated with eyesight were underdeveloped, suggesting that it wasn't the best at seeing. Additionally, unlike the North American tyrannosaurs, the Asian ones, like the Tarbosaurus, had narrower skulls, with eyes facing primarily sideways rather than straight forward. This meant that the Tarbosaurus did not have binocular vision. However, it redeemed itself with its one-of-a-kind hearing capabilities, similar to its older relatives. These specialized hearing skills likely played a significant role in its ability to hunt and communicate, making up for the lack of depth perception with a keen sense of sound. The Tarbosaurus's auditory system and its proportionally huge auditory nerve suggest it had an exceptional ability to hone in on the sounds of its prey. The presence of good hearing likely also indicates that its balance and coordination were above average. This was a key trait when tackling huge dinosaurs, which ultimately had more power in their movements. Battles with these larger prey would involve a lot of tugging and thrashing, where the Tarbosaurus's precise coordination and hearing would have given it an edge, allowing it to make calculated strikes and take down massive opponents. For these scuffles, the Tarbosaurus had another little trick up its sleeve: its skin. Surprisingly, paleontologists know quite a bit about what the Tarbosaurus's skin was like. thanks to skin impressions that showed certain areas of its body were covered in scales, offering some degree of protection. So far, footprints and a thoracic fragment have confirmed that the feet and chest were scaly. It's not fully confirmed that the rest of its body was covered in scales, but we do know from other tyrannosaurs that scales were found across the body. In the Tarbosaurus case, these scales varied in size, with the larger ones measuring about 2 centimeters or 0.7 inches, roughly the size of a dime. These scales didn't overlap, and they would have helped prevent superficial damage like scrapes and cuts, which could have led to infections. This is evident because there are no known Tarbosaurus remains showing infection-related damage, with the only known damaged bone coming from an isolated hand that was fractured during a struggle with prey. This reinforces the idea that Tarbosaurus wasn't a lazy scavenger, but rather a highly active predator. The Tarbosaurus was a predator that efficiently turned its ecosystem into its very own dominion, and this domain spread far and wide. Remains have been found within the Gobi Desert and present-day eastern China. Of all its known habitats, the neck formation is by far the best studied and is where the Tarbosaurus was most concentrated. This formation is today a dry desert, but during the Tarbosaurus's heyday, it was, in many ways, an oasis. The climate was warm and humid, and the land was split and broken up by large rivers, shallow lakes, and mudflats, all of which supplied life to expansive marshes and conifer-dominated forests. This, in turn, of course, allowed for the presence of a lot of dinosaurs. Along with the previously mentioned ones, there were also Tarbosaurus, Balaeohalisi, Prenosil, Opisthocadia, Mononicus, Adasaurus, Gammus, Ceramusimus, Conoraptor, Goiraptor, Oako, Nakoma Zanab, Bazar, and Borea. Interestingly enough, there were also plenty of other Tyrannosauridae around too, such as Betainraptor rex and Alio. Fortunately for the Tarbosaurus, none of these theropods were a major threat, with all of them being considerably smaller, with Alloramus being the closest challenger at roughly 1 ton. Still, these guys may have been a threat to younger Tarbosaurus, who targeted smaller prey in their adolescence, thus creating some competition. What the adults did have to worry about, though, was the environment itself. While its homeland was lush despite the lush environment most of the year, the Tarbosaurus's world was not without its challenges. Periodic droughts, similar to the ones seen in the famous Morrison Formation, would strike these ancient lands, drying up water sources and creating vast dunes. During these harsh times, life loss was unavoidable, and every Tarbosaurus had to rely on its instincts and sharp senses to survive. As the droughts intensified, competition for resources likely soared, with only the strongest individuals making it through. However, even the mightiest Tarbosaurus could not escape the consequences of these conditions. Fossils are only known from the time before the Tarbosaurus eventually disappeared, marking the end of an era for this formidable predator. The exact fate of the Tarbosaurus around 70 million years ago remains a mystery. Some scientists believe it evolved into a new species of tyrannosaur, while others think it was wiped out due to climate change. But what we do know is that this iconic predator left an undeniable mark on Earth's history. If you found this video interesting, be sure to check out our recent video on the Velociraptor, which could have been a contemporary of the Tarbosaurus and roamed the Gobi Desert during the late Cretaceous. Don't forget to subscribe, like, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts. See you in the next video.